Over the course of 50 years, Star Wars has become the apex of commercial franchise success in Hollywood and the entertainment industry. Even with more recent bumps in the road from its current owner, the Walt Disney Company, it's still something that is virtually unrivaled. And with some recent quote-unquote controversy out there...
Do we need more women in Star Wars? No, we don't. No one women don't even watch Star Wars.
I thought it was high time that we delve into Star Wars because there is one absolute, indisputable truth. Without men, Star Wars is dead. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Make sure to join us every Sunday afternoon at 6 p.m. Eastern right here for the live show. On a recent podcast with Star Wars Theory, psychologist Sadia Kahn had this to say.
Do we need more women in Star Wars? No, we don't. No one. Women don't even watch Star Wars. They don't even care about it. It's a man's little thing. Let them have it.
And for some reason, some folks out there consider that a controversial statement. But let me flip this around for a moment before we offer some facts. Imagine if Mattel decided tomorrow to come out and say that they were going to completely re-engineer Barbie from the ground up so they could make it more attractive to male audiences. Let's say that the recent Barbie movie that grossed $1.5 some odd billion globally was geared not into Barbie fandom, but the whole movie would have been about Ken. Do you think it would have done the same thing? No, of course not. What if they remanufactured all of the toys to appeal to boys? No, that wouldn't work either. Now, if anybody else out there thinks that such a maneuver would be considered corporate or franchise financial suicide, then, well, you'd probably be right. But that's exactly what Disney and Kathleen Kennedy at Lucasfilm seem to have done with Star Wars. The Barbie movie didn't make $1.5 billion around the world by attracting a bunch of men. Sure, there were some men that went to go see it, but those of us who did were going to see that film because of our girlfriends, our wives, or in my case, daughters. And like it or not, Star Wars is much the same in the reverse. Yes, there have been a number of women over the years that have gone to see the films, but a lot of times, most of those women are watching it because they're going with boyfriends, their sons, their husbands. Now, of course, there are plenty of women out there who love Star Wars just because they love Star Wars, but at no point in the nearly 50-year history of the franchise have women been the commercial driving force behind it. And just like Barbie was for girls, Star Wars was built predominantly, although not exclusively, for men. If you grew up in the 80s like I did, then you probably remember as a guy some of the biggest things to be on the block. Things like Transformers, Voltron, He-Man, later on down the road, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. All of these were huge franchises that sold billions of dollars worth of toys and merchandise, but none of them had the consistent, lasting staying power of Star Wars. Star Wars didn't just last a few years like the others. They went on for decade after decade. And then along came the prequel trilogies in the late 90s and early 2000s that reinvigorated the franchise for a whole new generation of young boys. A generation of young boys that had Star Wars passed down to them by their fathers and in some cases their grandfathers. This was the lineage of Star Wars, a tremendous franchise that even back then was unrivaled. And sure, some of those other franchises like TMNT and Transformers have continued on over the years, but none of them have continued to have the commercial financial success that Star Wars did. All of that, however, slammed abruptly into a concrete wall in October of 2012. It was then that the Walt Disney Company announced a deal with Lucasfilm owner George Lucas and the creator of Star Wars that Disney would acquire the entire Lucasfilm enterprise, including such things as Industrial Lights and Magic and Skywalker Sound, for the total of about $4 billion. half of which was to be paid in cash by the Walt Disney Company, accompanied by roughly 40 million shares of freshly minted Disney stock to complete the purchase. And of course, there was another caveat with that, and that was that longtime producer of Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, would have to come with the package deal and be given the reins of Lucasfilm to carry on in George's stead. This, of course, would go down as becoming arguably one of the worst, if not the worst, commercial mistakes in Hollywood franchise history. Don't believe me? Watch this. Here's an article from October 31st, 2012 from The Guardian. Star Wars, why Disney was destined to buy Lucasfilm. Even amongst all the excitement about the potential of new enterprises and films coming forward, theme parks from Disney, things that would have gotten investors in 2012 very excited for their shares in Disney, listen to this article carefully. As for Disney, acquiring Star Wars and Lucasfilm's other productions represents an opportunity to further extend its demographic reach to target male consumers of all ages. Over the past 15 years, Disney has been enormously successful at producing material for girls. Through its Princess and Fairies brands, it's been less successful at targeting boys. Even back then, everybody knew that Star Wars, just like Marvel 3 years earlier when Disney purchased it, was an acquisition that was built to put the House of Mouse more squarely in front of the boys, something that their marketing department, their merchandise, their brand of films and television shows up to that point had been unable to really do, at least not the ones past, say, age 5 or 6 that were watching Mickey Mouse cartoons. But then it happened. In one single camera frame, decades of franchise history and dominance in Hollywood was brought to its knees. In one single camera frame, the future of Star Wars was laid bare. And according to Kathleen Kennedy, it appeared that it was going to be a future in Star Wars that wasn't going to be for men. And then, to make matters worse, in an interview with New York Times just before the release of Rogue One, a Star Wars story, in Christmas of 2016, Kathleen Kennedy stated in so many words that, well, Star Wars just wasn't going to be catering to men anymore. Strangely, in that quote, Kathleen Kennedy suggests that she owed the Walt Disney Company, the company she worked for, more than the 40-year audience of Star Wars that were dominated by men. Honestly, that has to be one of the most tone-deaf and frankly ignorant statements that may have ever been uttered in the history of Hollywood. You see, by actually serving the audience that Star Wars was built on, you would be serving the Walt Disney Company. You would also be serving the investors, the stockholders of the Walt Disney Company. But instead, what you really did was serve yourself. And if that wasn't enough, then came the newly minted Star Wars Story Group, the all-female-led team to lead the Boys franchise into the future, with full regalia from Hollywood trade publications, complete with photo shoots and articles. Because nothing says it's for the boys like a bunch of angry feminist women that don't like Star Wars to begin with, shaping its future. By now, it should have become apparent to Disney investors in Wall Street that the original promise of building this for the boys may have been a bunch of smoke and mirrors. And Disney was about to take its recently acquired $4 billion purchase and rebrand it completely for girls. The problem, of course, is that over time, the realization set in, the girls weren't showing up. Bear in mind, by this point, The Force Awakens had already released, and it was already a big success, with $2 billion in global box office. Even considering the Walt Disney Company and Lucasfilm's massively overrun production budget of north of $550 million to complete principal photography and post-production on that film before they spent a penny on marketing, Disney could still call that a definitive success. There was a ton of merchandise sales. Hell, even I bought a little BB-8 robot for my son. But that success became very short-lived once the broader Star Wars fan base started to get a grip on what was about to happen. And then it happened in The Last Jedi. After Han Solo was turned into a derelict, loser, deadbeat father in the first movie and killed unceremoniously by his own son, we got treated to the true middle finger by Kathleen Kennedy to those male fans that she didn't want to cater to with Luke Skywalker, the deconstructed Luke Skywalker, who used to be referred to as the New Hope, which was now just the pathetic old man. The new female hero was better in every way, and that was it. Male audiences at that moment largely peaced out. We saw it in the box office drop from the first to the second movie, with The Last Jedi still commanding $1.3 billion at the box office, which is good. But it's a far cry down from what the first movie did, and that's not what investors expected that movie to do. And then, of course, because The Last Jedi was so bad, the male audiences that Kathleen Kennedy refused to cater to punished Disney and punished Lucasfilm by not even showing up to go see Solo a few months after The Last Jedi debuted, sending it into the toilet with somewhere close to $200 million in capital losses for the Walt Disney Company on that theatrical disaster. And then along came The Rise of Palpatine, or as some may know it as The Rise of Skywalker, with an even lower box office yet again. It limped over the $1 billion mark, which for most movies would be a tremendous feat, but not when you spend $520 million to film and complete that movie. And once again, that was before Disney spent somewhere close to $200 million on global marketing. Remember, studios like Disney only get about half of the gross box office receipts back from the theaters. As we've covered before, Disney really did not make much, if any, money at the box office with their 5 feature films in the Star Wars franchise. And that's, of course, in addition to the $2 billion they spent creating 2 Galaxy's Edge theme parks, which I might remind folks were originally designed meticulously over the course of several years by Disney's vaunted Imagineering team to include such famous locations like Tatooine, Hoth, and Endor. And of course, at the last minute, the brakes were put on that when Kathleen Kennedy managed to convince Bob Iger to turn them into something else because, as she stated, there is more new Star Wars ahead of us than what is behind. Once again, the classic Star Wars fans were being left in the dust as they thought they could build new modern audiences. But as the men checked out, so too did the sales, so too did the merchandise, so too did the revenues to the Walt Disney Company that otherwise would have been there. And let's not forget the $500 million Galaxy's Edge Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel in Orlando, Florida, that lasted basically a year before shutting down. There was a brief measure of unmitigated success that Disney Lucasfilm had, and that was thanks to Jon Favreau's Mandalorian. I think we all remember how popular Grogu or Baby Yoda became, and when the merchandise finally emerged roughly a year after being released, it was a big hit, but since then, it has seriously fallen back. Over the course of 3 sequel trilogy films, the Walt Disney Company with Rise Skywalker could not engender the type of audience reaction that 5 minutes of Luke Skywalker's triumphant return at the end of Mando's Season 2 got. And it's not even close. It's at least 1 order of magnitude difference. But since then, Lucasfilm has treated us to The Book of Boba Fett, which was a disaster, and Mandalorian Season 3, which was at best a disappointment. All of the fervor that was built 3 years ago when Luke Skywalker showed up at the finale of Season 2 is largely gone, and Disney's going to have to work overtime to try to get that back. But Disney, frankly, doesn't seem interested in real Star Wars. Disney doesn't seem interested in Han Solo. They don't seem interested in Luke Skywalker, at least not the characters from the original trilogy nearly 50 years ago now that made it what it is. Time is running out for the Walt Disney Company when it comes to the viability, the commercial viability of Star Wars. And if Bob Iger and Disney Lucasfilm are truly hanging their hopes on resurrecting Rey Palpatine for another movie, helmed by Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy.
It's about time that we had a woman come forward to shape the story in a galaxy far, far away.
I like to make men uncomfortable.
Every single piece of work that I've ever created has a piece of activism in it.
Then the Walt Disney Company and their stockholders are going to be in for a very rude awakening once again. Do men still love Star Wars? Absolutely. There's no question about that. But are they willing to spend the money in 2024 and beyond on the Disney brand of Star Wars? That's what seems in serious doubt. And that doubt increases exponentially every year. Just look at the toy shelves at your local Target and Walmart. What is the biggest thing that's out there that is still Star Wars? It's Legos. Star Wars branded Legos. But everything on the shelf for Lego right now, when it comes to Star Wars, is original George Lucas stuff. Try to find anything on the Lego shelf that is Disney's brand of Star Wars, except perhaps for a couple of Mandalorian pieces. From the $4 billion purchase to the nearly $3 billion investment in 5 feature theatrical films, to the $2 billion investment in 2 Galaxy's Edge theme parks, another reported $500 million for the Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel, which is now closed, and then at least another $1 to $2 billion in a bunch of television shows for Star Wars placed on Disney Plus, which I continue to remind folks has cumulatively lost since inception over $10 billion. There continues to be one solid, immutable fact, and that is this. While we love the women, and we love the women in Star Wars, and we love the women that love Star Wars, there's simply not enough of you out there. And without the men, Star Wars is unequivocally dead, commercially, financially. And that is something that Wall Street institutions and Disney stockholders and investors across the board should take very considerate note of very, very soon. We're reaching an endgame here. Just ask Marvel. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.